In today's video, we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors with a pretty heavy focus on some Canadian teams, including the Winnipeg Jets, Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens. We're also discussing the Detroit Red Wings, Philadelphia Flyers, the Colorado Avalanche, and a few tidbits on some free agency rumors as well. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So we have a variety of NHL trade rumors and some free agency rumors I want to touch on here today as well. So let's dive right in. I want to get started with the Winnipeg Jets. Now, as we know, the Winnipeg Jets are a team that's had a lot of success the past couple of years and have a lot of younger players that either have longer term contracts or are due for significant raises, therefore putting them in a pretty awkward position when it comes to the salary cap. Moves are going to have to be made. They're not going to be able to keep everybody, and therefore some trade speculation has been surrounding this team quite a bit. Now, of course, one of the names mentioned quite often is defenseman Jacob Trouba, who's really emerged to be a top defender. He's a 50-point player. He's a pending RFA, and he's only 1 year away from being an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, it is quite possible that Trouba remains a Jet, probably ends up on a 1-year deal. I would imagine his camp are going to drive another hard bargain. They could end up with in salary arbitration with another 1-year contract, which would put him directly into free agency, and they could risk losing him for nothing next year, which is certainly a position they do not want to be in. It also seems unlikely, based on past negotiations at least, that the Jets and Trouba could come to terms on a long-term agreement. And even if he is more willing to do that at this point, could they even afford him with all the other contracts and things they have to look after this summer? It does seem highly unlikely. So therefore, all signs point to Trouba being traded out of Winnipeg. According to some recent reports I've been reading, the three main teams that are mostly linked to Trouba right now are the Red Wings, the Rangers, and the Florida Panthers. Personally, I see the Red Wings as being the most likely destination. The Rangers are linked to trying to sign Erik Karlsson through free agency in the summertime. I think if they go down the free agent road here, they're going to be looking for some even bigger names. The Florida Panthers seem to have a lot of time and money invested in luring Artemi Panarin, possibly Sergei Bobrovsky down to Florida as well. So I really don't see them as being major contenders for Jacob Trouba, but the Detroit Red Wings make a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. For starters, we know that Trouba likely would be willing to sign long-term with the Red Wings. He is a Michigan native, and it's been reported before that that might be a place he would prefer to play on a longer-term basis, so there is that. Secondly, the Detroit Red Wings are kind of going through a rebuild here, and they could use a top defender like Jacob Trouba. When you take a look at their blue line, it certainly is an area that would really be a major help, adding a guy like Trouba who could play top pairing minutes on that right side. Certainly a distinct possibility based on that. Now, of course, you throw in the fact that the Winnipeg Jets will likely be looking for picks or prospects in return. Obviously, if they're shedding salary, they can't take much back in a way that's going to show up on their NHL roster and affect their salary cap immediately. And also factoring in that the Winnipeg Jets don't have a 2019 first-round draft pick, they might be looking to try to acquire one, possibly in a sign-and-trade type of deal. If they can sign Trouba to a longer-term contract in principle and then trade him away, they could likely get a better return, so it works better for both sides. And obviously, if a team like Detroit, who would have lots of picks and prospects, would be a good landing spot from that perspective as well. So I do see the Winnipeg Jets and the Detroit Red Wings being excellent trading partners in regards to Jacob Trouba. I can see the Winnipeg Jets trying to land a first-round pick. Now, of course, the 2019 first-round pick the Wings have is fairly high in the first round. They may or may not want to part with that. It would also depend here on the terms of the trade, what else the Jets might be willing to consider. They obviously have some pretty interesting prospects as well in their system. I'm not sure exactly who the Wings will be willing to part with in this regard. There does appear to be interest on the side of Detroit with the necessity from Winnipeg, and it does look like there's a pretty good match there. Is exactly what the return would be looking like. It's hard to say at this point, but I do see quite a possibility that we could see a draft day trade sending Trouba over to Detroit. So, of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on that possibility. What do you think the return should be? And especially if you're a Wings fan, would you be willing to give up that first-round pick in this year's draft if it meant landing Jacob Trouba from Winnipeg and having him sign to a long-term contract? Of course, staying with Winnipeg here, that might not be the only move that team is forced to make. They do have some other big guns here that need new contracts, including youngsters Patrik Laine and Kyle Connor. Of course, Laine did have a bit of a down year, but even a down year for Patrik Laine, still producing a ton of goals. They would obviously like to see the young forward be more consistent and produce on a little bit more regular basis. He obviously is a very streaky player. He's had times where he scores in bunches, and he's had time where he's been quiet in bunches as well. Overall, though, I have no doubts the Winnipeg Jets want to retain Patrik Laine and sign him to a very fair contract here. Now, it might end up being a bridge deal. They very well might be able to take advantage of his inconsistencies and get him signed on our shorter-term contract for right now, which might benefit Laine more long-term if he can get that consistency back and get back to being that 40 to 50 goal scorer that he is looked upon as being for that franchise. Now, in Kyle Connor's case, he quite often plays in the top line. He's had back-to-back 30-goal seasons. He's been a tremendous top forward for them, so he's certainly going to be getting paid. And really, if I were the Jets, I probably would try to lock up Connor on a longer-term deal myself. It's hard to say how much more he's going to progress and how much more his production is going to increase. They might want to take advantage of this and try to get that AAV down for a longer period of time. Now, of course, Jacob Trouba also is not the only defender they might lose, especially on the right side this year. Right side defenseman Tyler Myers is also a UFA, and I can't imagine they're going to want to be in a position where they could possibly lose Trouba and Myers both. But right now, with all the salary cap implications, needing new contracts for Laine, needing new contracts for Connor, potentially Myers and Trouba, there's just no way to keep them all here. But they might stand a chance at keeping Myers, signing Laine and Connor if they can trade somebody else. And that somebody else might boil down to be forward Nikolai Ehlers. Now, Ehlers is signed to a pretty good contract. He's on a $6 million deal on a 7-year contract. Obviously, Ehlers was a former first-round selection. For the most part, had a very successful young career with the Winnipeg Jets, but the last year or two certainly had his struggles during the playoffs, and the last regular season wasn't the greatest as well. Now, if you take a look at the fact that Ehlers has played a lot with Laine in the past, Laine's goals were down, so therefore Ehlers' assists were down. It kind of goes hand in hand to a degree here. But Nikolai Ehlers has yet to score a playoff goal in over 20 playoff games, so in the big time, when it matters most, Ehlers has been coming up short. So many other teams might be looking that his contract is being very team-friendly, and I do want to suggest here that perhaps a good trading partner for them might be the Montreal Canadiens. Now, at this point, I don't have any rumors to link the Jets and the Habs having interest in making that deal. Even NHL insider Elliot Friedman has brought up Nikolai Ehlers' name as a potential trade bait player for the Winnipeg Jets, and I can see the Habs being all over this. Obviously, the Habs took advantage of the Jets' salary cap situation last year to land Joel Armia. They took Mason off their hands and bought him out and retained Joel Armia, and I can see them possibly looking to make a similar move and take advantage of the situation to land Nikolai Ehlers. Again, it's not exactly clear exactly what the Jets would want in return. Obviously, all of these moves will be made as cost-cutting measures, so they're not going to want to take back anything too significant, mostly futures and picks. The Montreal Canadiens have done an excellent job the past few years of drafting. They have lots of draft picks here as well, and I can see them taking advantage of some other teams' cap situations in a move similar to this. So again, as I mentioned, where the Jets don't have a 2019 first-round pick, if they can't get a first-rounder back in the Trouba deal, possibly with Detroit, they might look to a team like Montreal, maybe look for a first-round pick for Nick Ehlers. Obviously, he's pretty young. The Habs pick's a little bit lower. They might be more willing to give that up to land a nice young forward who is already NHL experience. Adding a nice playmaking top six winger into their mix, I think would certainly help strengthen their team here longer term. So, of course, as always, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on that potential trade between the Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens. If you're a Habs fan and you had the opportunity to make a deal with the Jets to grab Nikolai Ehlers and you're giving up prospects and picks for futures, of course, depending on what that is that a deal you're willing to make? A couple quick rumors out of the free agency rumor mill here before we jump back into some trade talk. The Colorado Avalanche are showing a lot of interest in former New York Ranger and Winnipeg Jet forward Kevin Hayes. Now, of course, Hayes is a pending UFA. Signed a one-year deal last offseason with the Rangers after failing to come to terms on a longer-term contract. They were heading for salary arbitration when a one-year deal was reached. Obviously, the Colorado Avalanche could use some more forward depth, some more secondary scoring. They did get it through the playoffs here at times, but as we mentioned in the Colorado Avalanche offseason plan video, that would be an area of focus for this offseason, is to add some more experience and some more secondary scoring. Adding a guy like Hayes would kind of push a few other guys down the lineup here a little bit, give them a little bit more forward depth, and very well might be a nice addition to really bolster that secondary scoring. Now, in other free agency news, we are hearing that the Arizona Coyotes are not likely to re-sign forward Richard Panik, so he's likely going to have to go to free agency here and find a new team if he's going to continue his NHL career. The Carolina Hurricanes are reportedly set to buy out goaltender Scott Darling, who spent a year in the minors this past season. Both their other goalies, Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhinney, who played at the NHL level this year and did a pretty good job, I might add, are both unrestricted free agents. So the goaltending situation in Carolina beyond into next year is not really clear at this point. I would think more than likely they would try to re-sign at least Mrazek, possibly even McElhinney too, if they can keep that tandem together. I would at least consider it for the short term, or they very well might look to make another deal, either through free agency or trade to bring in another netminder. But I can at the very least see one of Mrazek or McElhinney returning. And of course, the more likely one would be Mrazek, but he may never know. He may test free agency here and find a deal that might be able to pay him more money. Hard to say, but the goaltending situation in Carolina certainly going to be a little bit interesting. And I would imagine Scott Darling will struggle to find another NHL opportunity, so it's hard to say if his NHL career is over or not at this point in time. Now, there also appears to be a lot of interest in the Dallas Stars to re-sign forward Matt Zuccarello, who they obtained from the New York Rangers at the NHL trade deadline. He seemed to be an instant fit there, fit in quite nicely. It's not quite clear what other moves the Stars are going to make this offseason. We've heard a lot of rumblings about Captain Jamie Benn. Obviously, it's also known that Jason Spezza won't be back. He's a UFA, and the Stars have informed him that he doesn't fit into their future plans anymore, so he'll be moving on. But Zuccarello is a guy they would like to retain. Now, whether or not he re-signs with the Dallas Stars will certainly impact compensation going to the Rangers in that trade at the deadline, because there was a conditional pick in there which involved him re-signing or not. So him signing in Dallas would cost them an additional draft pick, so they might feel it's worth it though, because he was a good fit. But there is a lot of interest right now, see if they can come to terms and he can remain with the Stars beyond this year. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs are another team facing a lot of salary cap issues due to the success of younger players who either have already or need new contracts. Obviously, it becomes a victim of your own success when it comes to the new salary cap world these days. And the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be forced to make some trades here. They're not going to be able to keep everyone, and there's a lot of debate over who comes and who goes and who stays and whatnot. And another player that's been mentioned at times is Nazem Kadri. Now, of course, Kadri ran into yet another suspension during the NHL playoffs, and some people believe that he very well could be a guy that's traded out. He has a very team-friendly contract. He's still signed for a number of years. He's still young enough that he would have a lot of interest from another team. He could play number 2, the number 3 center role, depending on the lineup that he's in, and certainly could get back possibly to being the 30 goal scorer he was just a short time ago. Of course, depending on where the Leafs salary cap situation sits once the Mitch Marner contract is sorted out, will determine how much money they have to play with here. They also have to determine if other young forwards like Kasperi Kapanen and Andreas Johnsson are signed and retained or possibly traded. But like I said, Nazem Kadri is a name that's been brought up who very well could be moved out, more so on a cost-cutting venture. Obviously, since the signing of John Tavares, where they have Austin Matthews and Tavares as a 1-2 punch down the middle, putting Kadri in that number 3 role has really hurt his production. He can still be an effective member of this team, but yet did he lose the team's trust in the playoffs by getting himself in trouble and not being available for a big part of that Boston series here yet again. So there has been a lot of talk that he could be the odd man out in Toronto in order to create some cap space to keep some of their other younger players. Now, many believe if he were to be traded, and I saw some comments and some other videos here on the channel in the past couple days indicating that a good place for him to land would be the Philadelphia Flyers, and I could not agree more. When I completed the Philadelphia Flyers offseason plan video the other day, I did mention that they should acquire another center who's capable of playing that number 2 slot, push Nolan Patrick down the lineup to give the kid more time to develop. Obviously, his first 2 years in the NHL have been okay, but he certainly needs time to develop. Many people are a little bit concerned with his lack of production so far. But personally, I think getting another qualified number 2 center to push him down the lineup a little bit might be the best thing for his development. He can get different assignments, play against more bottom 6 and third pair defensemen more often, which will be good for his confidence. I mean, keep in mind, Sean Couturier was the number 3 center for a number of years as well before he's blossomed to be the offensive force he is today. And obviously, he's a great two-way player as well. So it kind of forced Patrick to work on his overall two-way game. It could get him better assignments to get more points. There's still enough players in that Flyers organization that they could still have a lot of skilled players playing with him on the wings as well. So could the Flyers and Leafs hook up on a deal to possibly send Nazem Kadri from the Leafs to the Flyers? I think it would be an excellent match. Like I said, this is more of just a rumor of the fact that Nazem Kadri has been rumored to possibly be traded. And this is just me giving my trade scenario where I think would be a good landing spot for him. Based on team need that the Flyers need and what they would offer in return, the Flyers have a ton of great prospects on both the blue line as well as in the forward group. They have a lot of different options, draft picks, whatnot. Even though Ron Hextall was fired as GM, in my opinion, he left that team in great shape when it comes to picks and prospects. So they would certainly have a lot there that I think the Leafs would be interested in getting in return. So I think personally it would be a good match. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions down in the comment section. If the Toronto Maple Leafs did decide to trade Nazem Kadri, since they have to move out some players this offseason, do you think that the Philadelphia Flyers would be the perfect match when it comes to him, and that they would have a lot of interested assets that the Leafs would want in return and very well might make excellent trading partners? That is all your latest updates for NHL trade and free agency rumors. Of course, as always, as I mentioned here, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, I I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you do, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.